Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a long one. We have a bunch of things to get through, some shakeups, a lot of reviews, and finally, the finale to CW's Crisis on Infinite Earths. First off, let's get the big movie news out of the way. We have the first trailer to Morbius. I'm just going to get it out here. This was a better trailer than any of Venom's. A lot of Venom's trailers felt kind of tepid and honestly made me reluctant to even see the film outside of just basic curiosity. Those trailers pushed an angle that I thought the movie wouldn't be able to pull off. And it was a pleasant surprise when the movie ended up not even doing that. And instead it was just this goofy late 90s alien flick like Species or whatnot with some goofy buddy action thrown in. The first trailer to Morbius seems to have learned from this and has a lot of things in it that are apparently there to let us in on the zaniness from the beginning. Like the giant science bat test tube or the hidden bat mountain in what looks like Asia or the rainforest or the overbearingly corny uses of fur Elise. It's just silly as hell, and I'm all for that. While Venom might have been a pastiche of those arrogantly hip alien invasion flicks, Morbius seems a lot more inspired by the recent trend of science vampire stories, coming off some heavy riffs of things we've seen recently in shows like The Passage or The Strain, which makes sense and gives it a nicely kooky flavor without feeling too generic. More so just generic enough to feel adequately hokey. The weakest links of this trailer are that it doesn't seem to be full of any kind of stakes or conflict outside of Morbius's own inner conflicts, and it's a pretty weak backstory. People are guessing it's going to be either another vampire or a vampire hunter in the comics, but even then, Eddie Brock had Venom to bounce off of, while all Leto has is himself, and I doubt he will have the same electric back and forth dynamic that those two characters shared. It looks decent for what it is and what it wants to be, and I don't expect more than just another ridiculous genre film throwback. Hope what we see more of supports that. The only real complaint that I have are the intimations that the trailer is bringing in that they're going to be trying to connect with the MCU, all of which I hope gets cut. And not because of some zealous don't touch my perfect MCU Sony crap I've been seeing a lot lately of, but because I hope Sony's own films are able to be solitary and stand alone. Stuff like Wonder Woman, Shazam, Joker, and even Venom, those are kind of the way forward. Movies that are completely encapsulated in themselves. And I think that this should also try to aim for that. Have touches and have little nods, sure, but still feel like your own kind of movie. And I feel like this is Sony's attempt at trying to offload some of its weight, and I think that's just the wrong move. I really do think so. People are already frothing at the mouth at even hinting of this, saying that adding Venom and Morbius will only taint Spider-Man, the MCU. But after the shit show that was Far From Home, kooky, fun, silly one-off movies are exactly what this character and franchise needs. It's what all these superhero studios need. Mainly because it forces us to stop putting this shit on pedestals and actually start assessing them as entertainment and not just adoring them or just kind of, idolizing them because they're part of something. That's insanity. And I keep seeing that take over and over again. I mean, you can't tell me that this looks any worse than Ant-Man and the Wasp or Doctor Strange or Far From Home because I'm going to call you a liar. I'm going to call you a huge liar because this just looks like cheap, easy entertainment. And that makes it miles ahead of any of those other movies I just mentioned. So I hope that's what this is. I hope this is something entertaining, and I can't wait to see more of it. Moving on, we also have TV news. One of the most interesting of which is that we have more details on the upcoming Green Lantern TV show, and that it will focus mainly on 2 Green Lanterns and Sinestro. I'm hoping for Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz, but fingers crossed. Just no Kyle Rayner, for the love of God. And the biggest TV announcement is that HBO has decided not to pursue a second season of Watchmen after the creative team have stepped down. I mean, which is funny because continuing on and doing whatever they wanted to do would be the most Watchmen-y thing they could have done at this point. Honestly though, I'm really glad. I hated Watchmen by the end of it, and it's the fact that some things were actually really good that made me hate it even more. At the very least, whether you hated it or whether you loved it, we can all join together in being happy that this series does not continue. And that's something to really take stock in. Now we can head on into what I read this week. First off, we have Second Coming number 6. I just want to get this one out of the way as soon as possible because this was a complete disappointment, and not even in the ways that I expected. This series continues to not live up to its potential. What irks me about this issue most is that it almost does in moments, most importantly in how it balances the use of a Superman pastiche and Jesus. It's a conceit that's been really underused, misused, and downright baffling in this series, but this issue actually kind of gets around to having an engaging tonal mesh between these two aspects that isn't just lame, corny, overused jokes and gags. And that's kind of the only compliment I have for this issue. One thing that's kept me reading these past few issues is that Russell has actually gone out and made a sensitive story about Jesus, religion, and their place in the modern day, with modern sensibilities and modern thoughts, which is kind of ruined and betrayed by this issue, because instead of groaner superhero jokes, we get another round of really bad, painfully awful Christianity gags, stuff that is just so worn out and seriously unoriginal and uninspired. It's just so ridiculously painful to sit through. Even more so that these gags are then used as the backbone for some philosophical argument, which just falls flat because you're basing it off stuff that you yourself are just sort of construing into your own argument. Like, it doesn't hold any weight. It doesn't seem tangible to me. It feels very empty. It's very self-attested. It doesn't really say anything at all that cuts to the heart of religion that hasn't already been mediocrely stated by agnostic pundits for decades. And this issue just says it less coherently, which is a shame. It really lets down everything else that came before in a way I didn't see coming. And honestly leaves me feeling a bit hollow and maybe a bit ashamed at being excited for it. Not in a melodramatic way, but similar to HBO Watchmen, where you see the elements in here that are truly outstanding, but they're never given a real chance to blossom past everything else around it. It's never something special or enlightening. Overall, it's a weak series. Apparently, it'll be coming back for a second story arc, but I won't follow it. I just don't care anymore. It does a lot of cheap things. It goes for the lazy route. As I'm saying, I'm going to call this series lazy. It feels lazy in how it treats the Bible and how it treats Superman and how it treats Jesus himself, sometimes how it treats God, and I don't think it really does anything clever or ingenious, and there are parts where it is, and I've mentioned that before. I think that some parts where Jesus interacts in modern day are very eloquent and honestly very thought-provoking, and then it just doesn't really do anything with it that hasn't been said before. So overall, 1 thumb down, 1 thumb middle. Next up, we have Dead Eyes number 4, and this was a pretty fun way to end this story arc, but it wasn't really as satisfying as it could be, and honestly feels a bit rushed. It comes off as a really desperate way to make this fit into a concise, sellable story arc. It's kind of like the opposite of writing for the trade though, where you usually have a lot of decompression for a rush finale in order to make something feel more comfortable to read in one sitting. Dead Eyes, on the other hand, you have a rich full 3 issues, and then a finale that feels empty and uninterested by comparison. The first 3 issues have big questions, big stakes, big emotions, big problems, and then it just stops in its tracks to go, see you next time. It's kind of ridiculous. It makes the entire experience of reading it feel like you've accidentally bumped into someone on the street. It's just that weird, uncanny, startlingly jarring feeling. It's a decent issue and has some great character beats and set pieces, but how it wraps up and how awkwardly it just says, this is the end, leaves the biggest impression. I do think the arc as a whole has been solid for what it is, and what plot points it does leave open sound really entertaining, so I can't wait to see where it goes next, but I do think it could have been handled a lot more smoothly. I'll be back for the next tale though, so overall, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle. Moving ahead, we have Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, number 7. What is there to say about this issue that I haven't said about every other issue so far? I don't really mean that they're all the same or that they're all repetitive, but it's settled into a groove and I can't really say much more about it than that. Otherwise, this would just be me recounting the jokes of the issue, and that's fun for no one. But yeah, it's another strong issue full of delightful gags, art shifts, and a good balance between the deadpan and the cartoonish, explicitly in this issue because of how much it homages newspaper strip gags to boot. One thing that I felt was really well done was how this issue finally makes Jimmy Olsen being rich an engaging character point. I know it already made it funny since the first issue, but ever since New 52, it's just been sticking out like a sore thumb. Here we see how well it plays into Jimmy's own dynamic personality and how he really makes his mark. It's still not something that I feel works, but it gives him a lot more zest and attitude, and it works for what it's trying to get across here, which is that he has gumption and that he has heart and he has passion here, and I love it. I think that is probably the best way you could even do it. Overall, I wish the series had a stronger backbone like Dial H, because it would shoot up a lot more points for me if it had a story worth connecting to, and this one really doesn't. The story is the lowest level of importance in this series, and that's a shame because I want to be invested. The jokes would hit harder if I was invested. The little gags would hit harder if I was anywhere near to being engaged or caring about these people, but right now I'm just not. It's kind of settled into being a fun diversion, which is fine, and it's enjoyable in that way. So for this series, for what it's getting across, overall, 2 thumbs up. And lastly, we have The Question, The Depths of Vic Sage number 2. This miniseries has been impossibly good. This might be Lemire's strongest effort at DC. Cohen and Sienkiewicz being on board definitely helps, because this is one series that is a twofold punch by having some dry, introspective, and thoughtful narration, and then just grizzled, aged, chaotic art that is bursting with attitude that's been waiting to be unleashed for decades. It's powerful. It's an insanely impactful read each issue. In fact, this issue is probably better than the first one. It doesn't just catch up to the first for most of it, but instead tells a smoother, more consistent story than the previous one did, and then just implodes with raw energy and force. It draws you in with this poignant, tragic western tale with actual characters, actual stakes, and some some well-worn drama, and then it devolves into this Unforgiven style madness. And I keep saying like madness and insanity, but it does feel like only grasping onto reality, which works in favor of this whole fever dream quest angle the mini started with. Again, I don't want to give too much away because you have to read this, you have to experience this for yourself. It's brilliant, but it makes for this fully realized story that is just another piece of this larger tale. And when you're working with an anthology structure, which this is, showing different periods of Hub City and a question in each of them, you want each segment to feel complete, and this is probably the most complete of the two we've seen so far. It is a Western, and it earns every single little bit of catharsis and engagement that he wants you to have, and there is so much. It is maybe one of the best books of the year so far, and that is setting a high bar for everything else, and it's amazing. It really is. So please go check it out. Overall, 2 thumbs up. And finally, we head on into what I watched this week. The only thing is Crisis on Infinite Earths finale, or parts 4 and 5. This was kind of a huge letdown. Like, listen, I didn't go into this expecting high art or anything actually good, just a serviceable adaptation of Crisis given the constraints, the mood, and the whole working parts of the CW. And for the first 3 episodes, it kind of did that. Sure, the ending of part 3 was really lackluster and lame, but there was still some hope about the interesting things they could do. And these 2 episodes just really neglect to do anything with that. You have the setup at the end of part 3 that only 7 people can save the day, and one of them was just hijacked by someone else. Those are actually really fun stakes. What can you do with that? There's so many things you can sprout out story-wise from there. And the answer they do is just, they throw it out the window and instead go for having a pseudo clip show and then a really lame rock quarry fight, which is just not fun at all or clever or interesting. I mean, if you're not going to follow the comic, which they couldn't have done even if they had the budget to, I wasn't expecting a full one-to-one with the comic, but at the very least, use this to force yourself to think outside the box, and this doesn't. In fact, it just feels like these 2 episodes are just so wafting that you really could have merged them together to make one satisfying-ish finale, because there's so much wasted space here. You have so many characters doing nothing. You have so many retreading. You have so many empty spaces. You have characters that really added nothing and were nothing. And I'm wondering why they were even in this, other than the fact that we know them as a CW audience. Even Pariah, he's only really there because, hey, he was in the comic, but they don't give him anything to do. They don't even have him do anything he did in the comic. Meanwhile, like, the first thing we see in Crisis on Infinite Earths comic is like Pariah totally failing to save anyone because he can't, and he's tortured by it, and he's screaming, and he's trying to save a little boy, and the boy disappears. You tell me you couldn't have done that? You couldn't have shown us like a 10-second clip of him trying to do that? It would have added so much more to that character. Instead, they strip him of anything, they make him speak in monotone, and they give his backstory to the monitor. And it's just ridiculous because then they have to like work around the monitor, and you have to work around what that means for the antimonitor, and you have to work around what that means for the antimatter universe, and it's just taking so much away from the comic. Like, if you weren't even going to follow the story from the comic, then why ape it so much? Like, I feel like this would have gotten a lot more mileage if they were 100% original with it, but they aren't. And so a lot of it feels shallow, a lot of it feels superficial, and a lot of that is weighed down. And it's made worse by the fact that the episodes themselves can't carry 2 individual episodes of a story. Like the actual finale episode is 80% of regular CW episode. And I know that's kind of how it was in COIE, where at the very end, everyone thinks that they're like on a regular Earth, except things just merged together now. But that only lasted like 5 pages before the antimonitor came up and said, hell no, and then everything got rebooted harder. Here it's like, oh, I guess things are merged now. Like 40 minutes of really lame, corny dialogue, melodrama, relationship drama, and a slight conflict with a running gag on Legends of Tomorrow. And it's so lame. It's really lame. It saps all the energy out of it. Even if you didn't like part 3, like I did at the very end, you could see that there was some momentum there. But part 4, clip show, part 5, regular episode. And that is such a decrease and decline, almost off a cliff of interest. They really should have backloaded this. They really should have. It's a shame because there are parts which I think really do hit a great balance between the CW and the actual sort of grandiosity of the comic, and stuff that is really fun references to the comic, and stuff that are just generally entertaining little sides that the characters from the shows are getting into. But it's just drowned out and weighed down by emptiness character-wise, emptiness story-wise, even in places where it didn't need to be empty. Like, you can make excuses for like the budget, or we need these characters to be more important because of CW, but even then they just seem to be taking the shortcuts here, and it's a shame. It's a shame. This could have been a lot more special, and it ended up being just another generic CW crossover. Overall, I have to give it a 4.5 out of 10. It almost made the cut. but there are just too many things working against it. I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would, and I was actually pretty entertained here and there, but it felt like a waste of time, and I can't wait to go back to ignoring the CW outside of Stargirl. Fingers crossed that turns out to be good. Anyway, that's it for Crisis on Infinite Earths. There are no listener questions this week. As always, I'm just so grateful for anyone out there who's ever sent in a question, comment, or topic to the show. You mean so much to me. You're amazing, and I just love answering the questions, so thank you so much. And if anyone out there has their own question, comment, or topic, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. I want to give a shout out to the cover artist at DOTEMCEE. Please check them out. They're amazing. And thank you for listening. I hope you had a great week, and see you again next time.